When my husband, Alisher, first told me he was going to work in a faraway land, my heart felt a familiar ache. It was the same story for so many families in our small village in Kashkadaria. The men leave to build a better future, and the women stay behind to keep the heart of the home beating. We said our goodbyes under the warm Uzbek sun, with promises whispered and tears held back. I believed I was strong enough to handle it all. I had our 2 beautiful children, a home to care for, and the support of his family. In those early days, everything felt normal, just as we had planned. Life was a rhythm of chores, caring for the children, and nightly phone calls that bridged the thousands of miles between us. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. I settled into my new routine, finding comfort in the small, everyday tasks. Waking up early to bake fresh bread, the smell filling our small kitchen, was a ritual that grounded me. My children's laughter as they played in the dusty yard was the music of my days. My mother-in-law, a woman of quiet strength, was a constant presence, her wisdom a gentle guide. My father-in-law was the head of the household, a figure of respect, and I treated him with the honor he was due. The money Alisher sent home helped us live comfortably, and for a while I thought this was just a season of waiting, a temporary sacrifice for a brighter tomorrow. I never questioned my role. I was a wife, a mother, and a daughter-in-law. My life was woven into the fabric of this family and this village. I found strength in my duties, in knowing that I was holding everything together for my husband. Our phone calls were my lifeline. Hearing Alisher's voice, tired but hopeful, made the loneliness bearable. He would ask about the children, about the harvest, about my day. I would tell him everything was fine, that we were all waiting for him. I didn't want to burden him with my small worries. My world, though smaller without him, felt safe and predictable. I believed that as long as I did my part, everything would be okay. But life has a way of showing you that the ground you stand on is not always as solid as it seems. The familiar patterns can shift so slowly that you don't notice until the change is undeniable. I was so focused on being the perfect wife and daughter-in-law, on maintaining the peace, that I didn't see the subtle changes at first. The balance in our home, which had felt so steady, began to tilt. It was a quiet shift, a change in the air that you feel before you can name it. I was living in a world I thought I understood, but a different, more frightening reality was beginning to unfold right within the walls of my own home. My season of waiting was about to become a season of fear. It started with small things you could easily dismiss or explain away. My father-in-law, a man I had always known to be distant and formal, began to change. At first, it was just his presence. He would linger in the kitchen a little too long while I was cooking, his eyes following my every move. I would tell myself he was just checking on things, that he was the man of the house. I would try to make myself smaller, to be less noticeable, hoping to avoid his gaze. But his presence grew heavier, and the silence between us became thick with something I couldn't understand. The air would crackle with tension whenever we were in the same room alone. His comments began soon after. They were disguised as jokes or fatherly advice, but they left a cold feeling in my stomach. He would praise my cooking, but then his hand would rest on my shoulder for a moment too long. He would talk about how lonely it must be for a young woman like me, with my husband so far away. Each word was a small stone dropped into a calm pond, sending ripples of unease through me. I would force a smile and quickly change the subject, moving away to tend to the children or a chore. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being overly sensitive. I didn't want to believe that his intentions could be anything but honorable. The pressure escalated. His requests became more direct. He started asking me to bring him tea late at night, after my mother-in-law and the children were asleep. The first time, I thought nothing of it, but it became a nightly ritual, and each time, the feeling of dread grew stronger. He would sit there, watching me, his questions becoming more personal, more invasive. He would ask about my life with Alisher, about my feelings, about my loneliness. His voice was low, and his eyes held a look that made my skin crawl. I felt trapped, cornered in my own home, a place that was supposed to be my sanctuary. Fear became my constant companion. I started planning my days around avoiding him. I would make sure I was always busy, always surrounded by the children or my mother-in-law. I would stay in my room as much as possible, using the excuse of feeling tired or unwell. Sleep offered little escape, as my dreams were filled with his lingering gaze and unsettling words. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards at night would make my heart pound in my chest. I was living in a state of high alert, my body tense and my mind racing. The man who was supposed to protect me had become the source of my deepest terror. My biggest fear was not just for myself. It was for my marriage, for my husband. What would Elisher think if he knew? The thought alone was enough to paralyze me. In our culture, a woman's honor is everything. I was terrified that somehow this would be seen as my fault. Would he believe me? Or would he think I had done something to encourage it? This fear was a heavy chain around my heart, silencing the screams that were building inside me. I loved my husband more than anything, and the idea of causing him pain or creating a rift in his family was unbearable. So I kept the terrible secret locked away, hoping it would somehow disappear on its own. The weight of this secret was crushing. It isolated me, building a wall between me and the rest of the world. I felt completely and utterly alone. When I spoke to Elisher on the phone, I had to pretend that everything was perfect. I would listen to him talk about his hard work and his dreams for our future, and my heart would break a little more each time. How could I tell him that the home he was working so hard to provide for had become a place of fear for me? How could I add this terrible burden to his already heavy load? So I would paint a picture of a happy family, of laughing children, of a peaceful home, while inside I was crumbling. I was also terrified of the village. In a small place like ours, whispers travel faster than the wind. Reputation is a fragile thing, easily shattered. I could imagine the gossip, the judging eyes, the shame that would fall not just on me, but on my children. People might say I was a liar, that I was trying to cause trouble in a good family. They might twist the story until I was the villain. The fear of being shamed and cast out by my community was a powerful force that kept my lips sealed. It felt safer to endure the private horror than to risk the public humiliation. I felt trapped, not just by my father-in-law, but by the unspoken rules of the world I lived in. My days became a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. I lost my appetite. The vibrant colors of my life seemed to fade to gray. I would look at my children, so innocent and unaware, and a fierce, protective love would rise in me. But it was mixed with a feeling of helplessness. How could I protect them when I couldn't even protect myself? I felt like I was drowning in silence, and no one could see me struggling. The fear was a poison, seeping into every part of my life, stealing my joy, my peace, and my sense of self. I was disappearing, becoming a shadow of the woman I used to be. The four walls of our home, which once represented safety and family, began to feel like they were closing in on me. Every corner held a memory of a lingering look, an unwelcome touch, or a whispered word that made my blood run cold. The main room, where the family gathered, became a stage for a play where I had to perform the role of a happy, content daughter-in-law. I would sit with my needlework, my hands trembling slightly, forcing a smile as my father-in-law told a story. I could feel his eyes on me, even when he wasn't looking directly. It was a constant, suffocating pressure that left me breathless. My own room, my sanctuary with my children, became my only refuge. But even there, I didn't feel completely safe. I would barricade the door at night with a chair, a flimsy defense that offered more psychological comfort than real security. I would lie awake for hours, listening to every sound in the house. Was that his footstep in the hallway? Was he standing outside my door? My imagination became my worst enemy, painting terrifying scenarios in the darkness. The silence of the night was no longer peaceful. It was filled with the sound of my own racing heart and the whispers of my fear. The daily routines that once brought me comfort now became sources of anxiety. Going to the well to fetch water, a task I once enjoyed for the chance to chat with other women, became a race against time. I was afraid of leaving my children alone in the house, even for a few minutes. Cooking in the kitchen, once a creative and joyful act, felt like a chore performed under a microscope. I was constantly aware of his presence, his movements. It felt like I was a prisoner in my own home, my every action monitored and judged by my captor. The simple, beautiful rhythm of my life had been shattered into a million pieces of fear. Even the joy I found in my children was tainted by my secret. When I hugged them, a part of me felt like a fraud. I was supposed to be their fierce protector, their source of strength, yet I felt so weak and powerless. How could I teach them to be brave when I was living in constant fear? I would look into their innocent faces and feel a surge of guilt and desperation. I had to do something. I couldn't let this darkness consume me and cast a shadow over their lives. The love for my children became a tiny spark of defiance in the overwhelming darkness, a spark that I knew I had to nurture into a flame. Living in a small village means living under 1,000 watchful eyes. Everyone knows everyone, and every family's business is, in a way, the community's business. This closeness can be a source of great support, but it can also be a heavy burden. The fear of gossip, of mish-mish, was a constant weight on my shoulders. I knew that if even a whisper of my situation got out, the story would grow and change with every telling. It would become a scandal, a source of entertainment and judgment for others. I would be the topic of conversation at the bazaar, at the well, and over tea in every home. The thought of facing the women in my village was terrifying. I could picture their faces, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and scorn. They would look at me and see not a victim, but a problem. Some might blame me, wondering what I did to invite such attention. Others might pity me but keep their distance, not wanting to get involved in another family's troubles. In a world where a family's honor is paramount, I would be seen as the one who brought shame upon my husband's house. This fear of social isolation, of being branded and ostracized, was almost as powerful as the fear of my father-in-law himself. It kept me locked in a prison of silence. This silence was not just my own, it was the silence of generations of women who were taught to endure, to be patient, to put the family's harmony above their own well-being. We were taught that a good woman does not complain. She does not cause trouble. She absorbs the family's problems and keeps them hidden from the world. To speak out would be an act of rebellion against everything I had ever been taught. It would mean questioning the authority of an elder, the head of the family, which was an unthinkable act. I felt trapped by these deep-rooted cultural expectations, which told me that my suffering was less important than maintaining the illusion of a perfect family. So, I walked through my days with a mask on my face. I smiled at my neighbors. I exchanged pleasantries. I played the part of a dutiful daughter-in-law. But underneath the surface, I was screaming. The disconnect between my inner reality and my outward appearance was making me feel like I was going crazy. I felt invisible, as if the real me, the terrified and desperate me, was trapped inside a body that was just going through the motions. The village, with all its traditions and unspoken rules, felt like a giant wall that I could never hope to break through. I was alone, and the silence was deafening. Days turned into weeks of this silent torment, and I could feel myself breaking. The fear was a physical weight, making it hard to breathe, to eat, to think. I knew I couldn't go on like this. One afternoon, while my father-in-law was out and the children were napping, my mother-in-law found me weeping silently in the kitchen. She sat down beside me, her presence calm and steady. She didn't say anything at first, just simply placing a comforting hand on my arm. In that moment, looking at her weathered, kind face, a tiny crack appeared in the wall of fear I had built around myself. I saw not just my husband's mother, but another woman, a mother, who might understand. With a trembling voice, I began to speak. The words came out in a torrent, a flood of repressed fear and shame. I told her everything, about the lingering looks, the inappropriate comments, the late-night tea requests, the suffocating fear that had taken over my life. I spoke through sobs, my whole body shaking with the release of the secret I had carried for so long. I confessed my fear of what Alisher would think, of what the village would say. I laid my soul bare, expecting judgment or disbelief. I was prepared for her to tell me I was mistaken, that I was dishonoring her husband. I was prepared for the worst. But that is not what happened. As I spoke, my mother-in-law listened with a deep, unwavering attention. Her expression hardened, not with anger at me, but with a cold, clear fury that I had never seen before. She didn't doubt me for a second. When I finished, the silence that followed was not empty, but filled with a powerful protective energy. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You did the right thing by telling me. You are not alone in this. This is not your shame to carry." In that instant, it felt as though a mountain had been lifted from my shoulders. Just being heard, being believed, was a healing balm on my wounded spirit. That conversation changed everything. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. I was no longer isolated in my terror. I had an ally. My mother-in-law's validation was the lifeline I so desperately needed. She told me that we would face this together, that she would not allow this to continue. Her strength became my strength. The simple act of speaking my truth, of sharing my burden with one trusted person, had given me back a piece of myself. It was the first step toward reclaiming my voice and my life. It taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. My mother-in-law was a woman of few words, but her actions were powerful. She did not waste a moment. That very evening, she made a decision that would shake the foundations of our home. Without any drama or shouting, she calmly and firmly took control of the situation. She told her husband, my father-in-law, that what he was doing was wrong and that it would stop immediately. Her voice, though quiet, carried the weight of absolute authority. It was the voice of a matriarch protecting her family, not just from outside threats, but from threats within. She was a lioness defending her cub, and her resolve was unbreakable. She immediately made a phone call. It was to my husband, Alisher. I was terrified, my heart pounding as I listened to her speak. But she handled it with incredible wisdom and grace. She didn't create a panic. She calmly explained the situation to her son, assuring him that I was safe and that she was handling it, but that it was time for him to come home. She presented it not as a moment of crisis, but as a family matter that required his presence. Her tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. She was not just protecting me, she was protecting her son's marriage and the sanctity of their home. Her decisive action was a masterclass in quiet strength. The atmosphere in the house shifted instantly. My father-in-law, faced with the unyielding strength of his wife and the knowledge that his son was coming home, retreated. The oppressive energy that had filled our home vanished. He no longer sought me out. He avoided my gaze. The power dynamic had been completely overturned. I could finally breathe freely within my own home. I watched my mother-in-law with a newfound sense of awe and respect. She had done what I thought was impossible. She had spoken truth to power, upheld justice, and protected the vulnerable, all without causing the explosion of shame and gossip that I had feared. Her actions taught me a profound lesson about the nature of true strength. It is not always loud and aggressive. Sometimes, strength is a quiet, unwavering commitment to what is right. It is the courage to confront injustice, even when it is uncomfortable and difficult, especially when it is within your own family. My mother-in-law could have chosen the path of silence, of preserving a false peace. Instead, she chose truth. She chose honor. She chose to protect me. She was a quiet hero, and her courage gave me the courage to believe in a better future. Within a week, Alisher was home. The moment I saw him walk through the gate, a wave of relief so powerful washed over me that my knees felt weak. He dropped his bags and rushed to me, pulling me into a tight embrace. He held me for a long time, and in the safety of his arms, the last of my composure crumbled. I sobbed, releasing all the pent-up fear and loneliness I had carried for months. He didn't say much, just held me and whispered, "I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here now." His presence was the anchor I had been drifting without for so long. It was the end of my isolation. Alisher did not question me. He did not doubt me. He looked at me with so much love and regret, angry that he hadn't been there to protect me. He listened as I retold the story, this time not with the trembling fear of before, but with the steady voice of a survivor. He sat with his mother, and together, they affirmed that the home needed to be a place of safety for me and the children. His support was absolute. He looked at me and said, "You are my wife, and the mother of my children. Your peace and safety are the most important things in the world. Nothing and no one is more important than that. His return was not just about my personal safety, it was about re-establishing the proper order of our family. He had a long, private conversation with his father. I don't know what was said, but the outcome was clear. A new line had been drawn, a boundary of respect that would not be crossed again. Alisher made the decision that we would move into our own small house nearby, a place that we could truly call our own. It was a bold move, but it was the right one. It was a declaration that our little family unit was his priority. He was building a new sanctuary for us, a place where fear could not enter. Alisher's support was my final healing. It was the confirmation that my fears of being disbelieved or blamed were unfounded. He saw me, he heard me, and he stood by me without hesitation. His love and trust were a powerful shield. It showed me that a true partner is not just someone who provides, but someone who protects. His return didn't erase the painful memories, but it surrounded them with a new reality of safety, love, and unwavering support. I was no longer a victim hiding in the shadows. I was a cherished wife, standing in the light, hand in hand with my husband. Today, life has settled into a new, more peaceful rhythm. We live in our own little home, just a short walk from my in-laws. The children play happily in our own yard, and the air is filled with laughter, not tension. My relationship with my mother-in-law is stronger than ever, built on a foundation of shared struggle and mutual respect. I have found my peace again. But I am not the same woman I was before. The scars from those dark days remain, not as open wounds, but as reminders of the strength I discovered within myself and the importance of speaking up. This experience taught me a lesson that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Your voice has power. For so long, I believed that silence was my only option, that it was the price of peace. I learned that true peace cannot be built on a foundation of fear and unspoken pain. Speaking my truth was the most terrifying thing I had ever done, but it was also the most liberating. It was the key that unlocked my prison. It showed me that I was not powerless and that I did not have to suffer alone. My voice, even when it was just a whisper, was strong enough to change my world. I learned that we are never truly alone, even when it feels like we are. There is always someone who will listen, someone who will believe. For me, it was my mother-in-law. For another woman, it might be a sister, a friend, a neighbor, or a community leader. The crucial step is to reach out, to break the silence. Shame thrives in secrecy, but it withers in the light of compassion and understanding. We must teach our daughters and ourselves that our safety and well-being are not negotiable. We have a right to feel safe in our own homes and in our own communities. My story is not just my own. It is the story of many women who suffer in silence, afraid of the consequences of speaking out. I share it now in the hope that it might give another woman the courage to find her voice. Know that you are worthy of being heard. Know that your pain is real. And know that you have the strength within you to seek help and demand a change. You are not alone. Let the echo of my story be a reminder of your own power. Let it be a testament to the fact that even after the darkest night, the sun will always rise again.